Hello, Holly.
Hello, how are you?
Oh, I'm so good. It's so good to see you.
I have been
It's
having
so
so
good to
much
see
fun
you.
listening to all of these speakers this week. I can't tell
Oh,
you, I've been
aren't
really
they
blown away.
amazing?
Yes, absolutely. So much good stuff here. Thank you.
Yeah, it's been so good. It has been a long week, and I end up like this morning. A friend messaged like, "How are you feeling?" Because it's been a long week, but I'm like, I
Yeah,
actually feel really good today. I
that's
mean,
amazing.
and I know it's almost a little bit bittersweet. Of it's the last night. It's the
Yeah.
last night. But so many great stories have been shared. The boundaries, the lives. Like there are so many. I think Suzanne was the one that when I first chatted with her, she was talking about somebody is going to share a nugget that's going to impact somebody's life and changes it forever. And there's been so many nuggets given. And I'm just
Absolutely. And
excited to be on this journey with everybody.
sometimes I think we forget that it's not about reaching masses all the time. Sometimes it's just reaching that one person, that one woman that for whatever reason needed to be there in that moment to hear what that person had to say that changes everything for them. So
Everything.
things like this,
Yeah. Well,
platforms that you have like this make all that possible.
yeah. I'm glad you're here for it. And you're going to talk about how to lose the weight, but it's not WEIGHT, it's WAIT. Stop waiting
Yes.
and start living. And you're doing an opt-in for activate your intuition. Just fill out the little form on your website and they can get access to that. And that's on the digital download, the digital participants guide. So I'm super excited to hear what you have to say. And we'll have a little bit of conversation towards the end.
Excellent. Thank you. I want to start by saying that being able to be on a platform like this and share what you've experienced is one of the most powerful things you can do, not just as an entrepreneur, but as a reminder of how far you have come as a woman, but as a human being, as a soul on this planet. If you've ever found yourself waiting for the right time to live fully or waiting for the right time to feel confident enough to take the leap, qualified enough to start over, or just to feel ready enough to claim your space, this talk is going to be for you. Because what keeps so many of us stuck isn't our weight, our age, or even our circumstances. It's the lack of boundaries we have in our lives. And it's really the belief that we need to earn our worth before we're allowed to say no that's the cause of this kind of strife. So today, I want to show how boundaries are really the key to living with confidence, clarity, and freedom. So anybody can stop waiting and start living. Because learning to set boundaries and making a pivot in my own life didn't come neatly wrapped in some package of clarity and confidence. For me, it came during a time of complete and total unraveling. So I'm going to tell you a story. The world had just shut down because of COVID. My marriage was ending, and I had accepted a third job to help support myself in this process. At the same time, I'm navigating perimenopause and menopause and all the inevitable changes that brought to my body and riding these waves of emotional turbulence, physical discomfort, and that nagging feeling that everything I knew was just slipping away. And in the middle of all of that chaos, I started to question absolutely everything. For years, I built my own coaching practice around weight loss, WEIGHT, and dieting, and really helping women manage their bodies. And it made sense for me at the time because I'd spent decades chasing my own illusion that if I could just get my body perfect, the rest of my life would be perfect too. But no matter how much my body changed, I still felt hollow and empty inside. And the more I focused on shrinking my body, the smaller my world became. At the same time, while I was physically and emotionally exhausted, juggling jobs and managing a divorce and grief and grieving the life I thought I was going to have, I started to hear a quieter voice begin to whisper inside me. And I realized it was really just my intuition. And it was saying, this isn't it. There's something so much more for you, something deeper, and something that's going to feel more true. And I realized that the work I was doing in the diet industry was no longer aligned with the woman that I was becoming. But walking away from everything I'd built felt terrifying to me at the time because I was afraid that people wouldn't understand and my clients were going to leave. And I was afraid I was going to lose this credibility that I'd fought so hard to earn. And if I'm being completely honest, I was afraid to lose the identity that I'd clung to for so long as this weight loss coach. But still, I couldn't ignore the truth in my soul any longer. I was changing, and the work I had to do was going to change too. So, in the middle of all the upheaval, the heartbreak, and the financial instability, plus menopausal fog and a global pandemic, I gave myself permission to set some boundaries and make a pivot. So I started by speaking openly about my challenges with body acceptance, the interest I had in intuitive eating, and this deep spiritual journey of reconnecting with my inner wisdom. And I didn't have a polished rebrand or even a perfect plan. I just had this growing conviction that I could no longer betray myself in service of being palatable or acceptable to everybody else. And here is what really surprised me. The more I showed up as my whole messy, imperfect, evolving self, the more the right kind of women started to find me and want to know more about what I was doing. And these were women who were done with waiting, just like I was. They were done with starving themselves, not just physically, but emotionally and spiritually, just for the approval of somebody else. And the more I began to honor my own truth, the more I attracted women who were ready to do the same thing. And so setting boundaries didn't just transform my business, it transformed me and the life that I'm living now, because I started to trust my body again. I stopped punishing it and I started listening to it. And I learned to love myself, not in spite of all these sort of flaws that I thought I had, but because of all these things that made me who I am. And I began living with more ease, a lot more confidence, and even more joy, which was something at that time in my life I wasn't sure I was ever going to feel again. And so here's what I know for sure. The permission to set boundaries doesn't really come from anybody else. It has to come from you, from that part of you that's tired of pretending, tired of performing and waiting for someday. And for so many women, years of dieting and perfectionism and striving to be the good girl have created a profound disconnection from our bodies, our intuition, and ourselves. Because diet culture really teaches us to ignore those cues our body gives us, the cues for hunger. It teaches us to mistrust the cravings that we have and rely on these kind of made up external rules instead of honoring our inner knowing and our body's wisdom, really. And this disconnection doesn't just affect how we eat, it impacts how we live our lives on a day-to-day basis. We stop trusting ourselves. We kind of lose that confidence in our own decisions, and we put our lives on hold, waiting for this future where we feel we're finally going to be enough. And we wait to feel ready before we really live our lives. We wait for these external validation before we begin to learn to say no. And we wait to feel confident before we give ourselves permission to let our personality show or to take up space in the world. And in the waiting, we silence ourselves and we shrink ourselves, and eventually we abandon ourselves. So now it's time to get honest with this whole process. And I want people to ask themselves, how many times have you told yourself, I'll start living when? Fill in the blank. I'll speak up when I feel more confident, or I'll put myself out there once I feel everybody else in my life has been taken care of. Or, okay, I'm going to rest, but not until I finish this impossibly long to-do list. Or I'll finally set that boundary with that difficult person when I'm sure it's not going to hurt anybody else's feelings. And while we're thinking all these thoughts, we wait and we wait. We wait until our kids are older. We wait until our partner's career has taken off or at least stabilized. And we wait until we lose the weight, until we feel more confident in our bodies, or until the number on the scale tells us we're finally good enough. We wait for the chaos to calm down, for the stars to perfectly align, and for the perfect moment that we've convinced ourselves that is going to magically appear. That perfect moment for me never showed up. And I'm guessing for a lot of you, it didn't show up either. And during all of this waiting, we press what I like to call, and this was inspired by you, the invisible pause button on our lives. What's there? Even if you can't see this pause button, it's that silent agreement that we make with ourselves. And it says, I'll live later. And later becomes months, and months become years, and years become decades. And suddenly one day we wake up and we're 45 or 55 or 65, and we look in the mirror and we ask ourselves, where did I go? How did I disappear in my own life? And this pause button is really one of the most normalized forms of self-abandonment that I've ever seen. And it starts out like perfectionism. And it's something like, I'll start when I feel fully ready and perfect. And it looks like people pleasing. I'm going to speak up when I know it's not going to hurt anybody's feelings or I'm not going to upset anybody. And it looks like a fear of kind of being too much, giving yourself permission to take up space or show your personality or wear the wild print when you know maybe you're going to wait till it's a little safer to feel like you can do that. But the pause button also looks like shame around aging, around menopause, around weight gain. And you say things to yourself like, I'll wear the bathing suit, or I'll book the photo shoot, or I'll go on the trip when I finally look the part, when I finally look ready. And we keep telling ourselves that living fully is something we have to earn, that we need to shrink ourselves to deserve joy, or that we need to be, I don't know, more agreeable or accommodating and self-sacrificing before we're allowed to have any kind of boundaries at all. And this waiting is often so deeply ingrained in us that it starts to feel like our responsibility, or we misinterpret it as kindness or maturity. And we've been praised for being the one in the family who could hold it all together, or being the helper or the strong one or the one who's always reliable. But what is it costing you to be everything to everybody else while you're putting your own life on hold? So I know that was a lot. So I want to invite people to just take a breath and gently ask yourself this. What are you waiting for right now? What have you placed on pause, telling yourself that you'll come back to it when the time is right? And how long have you been waiting to be ready before you live your life authentically? Because when we live with this invisible pause button pressed, we silence ourselves before we've even spoken, and we shrink our dreams before they can really take shape. And we begin to abandon our own needs just to maintain this illusion of harmony in our lives. And that pushes our desires off to someday while our days just keep ticking by. And I can't tell you how many mornings I would wake up, get dressed, and look in the mirror and think, all right, when I lose 20 pounds, I'm going to wear that red dress. Or when I feel more confident, then I'm going to pitch that podcast interview to that one person I would love to interview. Or I'd even said, when things calm down, I'll give myself permission to rest. But now I got to go. And every day felt like a cycle of proving and performing and postponing. It was exhausting. It's exhausting just talking about it. And what's so sad is that I was actually lonely in this process because it was quietly stealing my life. And during the pandemic, as I mentioned earlier, everything fell apart. My marriage was over. I was working 3 jobs just to keep it together. And I was navigating weight shifts and body changes and mood swings and sleepless nights and all of the joy that's menopause. And in that chaos, I realized there was never going to be a right time to start living. There was no one to come rescue me or hand me permission. And if I wanted to live the life I knew I deserved, I had to choose it, even if it was feeling messy. So this invisible pause button, it's really just a lie that we've inherited, because you don't need to be ready, and you don't need to feel perfect, and you don't need to shrink your body or your dreams to deserve joy. I don't think midlife is too late. I think it's the perfect time to unpause your life. It's really that moment you get to reclaim yourself. All right, so I want to get back to boundaries because I went off on my own little thing there, because boundaries is where the pause button can actually be unpaused or released. For so many of us, boundaries feel scary, and we think, okay, I'll set a boundary if I know it's not going to hurt anybody, or if I say no, I'm going to lose that relationship, or if I ask for what I really want, people are going to think I'm super selfish. And we've been taught that boundaries are just walls. They're cold, they're rigid, they're harsh. But here's the truth. Boundaries aren't barriers that push people away. They're bridges that bring us home to ourselves. They're a reclamation of your energy, your time, and your worth. And they're clear, compassionate agreements about what you will and will not allow in your life any longer. So they're not a rejection of other people. They're just a protection of yourself. And they're how you honor your time, your energy, your dreams, and yes, even your body. Because setting boundaries, it can feel hard because we're afraid of rejection. We think people are going to leave us if we stop over giving. And it creates a lot of fear because we don't want the conflict. We've been taught to keep the peace at all costs. And we're afraid of judgment. We don't want to be seen as too much or too difficult. And we're afraid we're going to lose love or opportunities because we said no. But the real truth is, living without boundaries costs us even more. It costs our health. If we push ourselves into burnout, that's not good. And it steals our joy because we start saying yes to things that really drain us. And it definitely steals our identity because we start molding ourselves into this concept of what everybody else tells us we're supposed to be. So what if we looked at boundaries as acts of love instead? They allow you to live aligned with your values. They create this space for rest and creativity and joy. And they strengthen our relationships because they're actually rooted in honesty and not this sort of silent resentment. And they help us stop waiting for permission and start living aligned with who we truly are. Because when you set a boundary, you send yourself a really powerful message that says, my needs matter. And here's something I want you to know, just deep in your soul. Boundaries are how you build confidence. You don't wait to feel confident before you set boundaries. You've got to set boundaries and then the confidence is going to follow. So what would a boundary in real life look like? They don't always have to be these big dramatic declarations of independence. Sometimes they look like just blocking off a quiet hour in the morning just to check in on yourself. And maybe it's asking for help without feeling guilty. But they can also look like, I need time to think about that before giving an answer. See, these small acts are revolutionary because women have spent decades putting themselves last. And one final thing I'm going to add is, did you know that boundary setting is actually spiritual work? See, boundaries aren't just a productivity hack. They are spiritual, emotional, and embodied work. Every boundary you set is actually a declaration of, I trust myself enough to protect what matters to me. Or I believe I'm worthy of rest and joy and peace. And I'm no longer willing to, abandon myself for somebody else's approval. So boundaries just help us return to ourselves. They reconnect us with our intuition and that quiet voice inside that says, you need a rest, or this is where your energy is best spent. And boundaries are how we honor that voice, even when our intuition might feel a little scary.
Wow. So the chat has blown up a little bit, and you've made a few people cry.
Oh,
I was happy to. The tears are healing. So
yeah,
the tears are
absolutely.
healing, but this one's bringing me to tears. The cost was way too high. Where did the time go? No more waiting for someday. Yeah. So your message definitely hit home with the ladies, and your voice just, you probably hear this, or maybe you haven't, but your voice is very comforting and
Oh,
peaceful. And it sound like, at least for me, when I'm listening, it's just very soothing and comforting. And so I think that might also add to a little bit of the emotion. I don't know, maybe not, but yeah, you have a very good, calm spirit to you.
thank you. My
You were
intention
talking
is
about
always
some
just to
heavy
show up in
stuff
service.
with, yeah, yeah. You were talking the heavy stuff about COVID and then the divorce, and I'm dealing with Perry right now. He's a jerk. Perimenopause. I just call him Perry, and he needs to go. And then I
Hmm.
don't know what's going to happen in menopause. So it's like the devil versus the devil you don't know, but I'm done. It's just awful.
Well,
And so
for any
I
woman
can't
where you,
imagine dealing with all of that.
any woman that's where you are right now, Sam, I just want to give you all a message of hope. It gets better. It does get better.
Okay. Very good. That does make me feel better. Let's see. Somebody says, oh yeah, her voice is very comforting. Yeah. So I wasn't the only one feeling that. So
Oh,
let's
thank
just
you.
talk a little bit more, because what you described was chaos with COVID and all the things happening at that time. And
Mhm.
you started setting boundaries. You had to shift your whole business. It was like
Mhm.
your whole life was changing. Was there one particular boundary that you started with that helped you go from what you had been doing to stop waiting on living?
It's sad, but I'm going to say my very first boundary was my divorce. It was
Um,
getting to a place where I recognized that this wasn't working and I wasn't going to be able to make it work. You can't force something that's not meant to be. And I had to let that go. And that was probably the hardest thing I'd ever had to do, was to come to the realization that this was over, because I wanted the fairy tale just like everybody did. You get married and you stay married forever. And that's just not what happened. It's not what happens for a lot of women. And I want to recognize that we all have this process where we have to decide what's right for us and what's not. And sometimes that decision is forced on us. We don't want the divorce. And sometimes we know we really need it, but we're just afraid of what our lives are going to be like without the sort of identity that goes along with being a married person. So that was probably the first boundary, was just to say, here's a line in the sand. I can't cross it any longer.
yeah. And so when you did that, even though it was scary and that was the
Mhm.
most difficult thing, you talked about how boundaries come before confidence. How did that, tell me a little bit about that.
Making a change in your life, whether it's changing your focus for business or changing a relationship or just deciding to take a new job or whatever the change might be for you, a residence, we always feel like I've got to have all my ducks in a row. It's got to be perfect before I can move forward. And then I won't make any mistakes and everything will work out. The truth is, you can't control any of that. So what I discovered for myself was that if I just did it anyway, I felt the fear and I knew that the fear was just telling me there was something bigger out there. It wasn't telling me to stop. It was saying, yeah, this is scary. Let's do it. So it was telling me, move forward anyway, baby. This is going to be good. And even if it's not perfect, even if you fall flat on your face, you learn. And knowing that you can fall flat on your face and then get back up and dust yourself off and do it again and do it better, that's what creates confidence.
Yeah, I feel that for sure. And we have a 100% success rate of making it through the hard days. And I have learned very clearly that we talk about things being hard. We've done a lot of hard stuff in our life, but most of the time it's been the hard stuff that wasn't going to get us the life that we were meant to have.
Mhm.
And when you get to make that choice, that is the hard thing, and then walk in that and be like, oh, look at what I can do. You were talking about getting to choose, and I very much believe that you can create any life that you want to. And it's just one choice at a time.
Mhm.
And sometimes I used to say that sometimes the right thing is the hard thing, but I think I've learned that almost always the right thing is the hard thing. It's not just sometimes.
I couldn't
So
agree more.
why do you think that for so many women, we feel like we cannot do the boundary thing without guilt? And how the second part of that, because we've talked a little bit about that, but from your perspective,
Mm.
why can we do it without guilt? But when you can't, then how does that keep you stuck in the waiting?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's because women in general, but especially I'm 58. So women in my generation, absolutely. And my mothers were always raised to be the good girl. You were supposed to be perfect at everything. You were supposed to do everything for everybody else. Your own needs always came last. You were quiet. All of those things told us that you're not enough until someone else gives you permission to be enough. So when we put ourselves last, we develop this sense of guilt if we ask to be first once in a while, because we've been conditioned to believe that saying no or prioritizing ourselves is somehow selfish. It makes us greedy, or it makes us kind of bad people because we want something for ourselves. We've been told we're always supposed to be second or last, depending on where you fall. But that guilt keeps us from doing anything that we wanted to do with our lives. And as I said earlier, we need to learn that asking for what we need and having a boundary that's just, I'm not going to accept anything less than what's meant for me. It's not selfish. It's really how we honor ourselves and create that space for receiving more in our lives. You've got to clear out some of the old before you can bring in any of the new, right?
Yeah, if you're holding on to something in your hands and you have your hands are full and you're trying to get something new, you can't, because until you let go of something else, you're not going to be able to take on anything new. So
Absolutely.
one last question. Jade is here and she's going to be sharing next, but I have one more question for you. Just for anybody listening, whether they're watching now or a replay, and they feel like some of the women that were in the chat talking about, yeah, the cost was too high. And where did the time go? And it feels like they've been waiting forever. Maybe
Yeah.
what's one step that they could take to begin losing the weight today?
I think the most important thing we can do as women is acknowledge that we're not broken. There's nothing wrong with us. And that wherever we happen to be on our journey of self-discovery, of reinvention, of empowerment is exactly where we're supposed to be. It's not always going to be easy, but I guarantee you, if you trust yourself and trust your intuition, it will always be worth it.
It will always be worth it. That is a mic drop moment. Yes, it will. Holly, I'm so glad to know you and be on this journey with you. And ladies, the digital participants guide has the link to click through to get your activate intuition.
Activate your intuition. Yeah, it's a free guide that I have to help people reconnect with that.
Yeah, very good. And you're in the community as well. So y'all reach out and get connected. And I'm sure we'll see you soon.
Thank you so much, Sam. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye, Holly.